Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's trouble in the skies when I put John Guillermin's Skyjacked against Robert Butler's Turbulence. And this one was a hard decision to make because both of these movies are really good, very thrilling. So let's just dive right on into the nitty and the picky. First up, we have John Guillermin's Skyjacked with an all-star cast of Charlton Heston, Yvette Mimeo, James Brolin, Walter Pidgeon, Roosevelt Grier, among many others, And the film itself was one of the many airplane movies that they made in the 70s. Of course, Airport at the beginning of the decade kind of kicked that off, and it was all that kind of disaster stuff. And I think this would be the first one that Charlton Heston was in. Of course, he would later on be in Airport 1975, but here he's the pilot, and we have what seems like a normal flight, everything going well. The biggest issue we see in the beginning is that like Charlton Heston and Yvette Mimeo clearly have had a relationship, even though that she's married to another pilot, or maybe not married, but definitely involved with another one, the other pilot in the plane. And so, but the trouble begins when somebody sees some fucking note written on a mirror in lipstick saying there's a bomb on the plane, and if you don't divert it to Anchorage, the plane itself is going to Minneapolis, and if you don't divert to Anchorage, it's going to blow up and all this stuff. And, they're all trying to like figure out what's going on. Of course, there's a U.S. senator on the plane played by Walter Pidgeon. He's on the plane with his son. And, they think they might have something to do with that. They're scurrying around. But what the real trouble is, there's a soldier on board played by James Brolin who, seems normal. He's claiming to be going to Minneapolis to see his sister who's getting married and all this stuff. And Roosevelt Grier, who plays a jazz musician, he's got a cello. And he basically he buys an extra seat for his cello. So he, wants to say, well, I'll let, this soldier have my seat, if y'all can find a safe place for my cello and stuff. And Yvette Mimeo is the flight attendant, the head flight attendant. And she fucking basically makes sure everything's good. She's really good at her job and stuff. And we see through a little kind of intimate flashback, her little passion romance with Charlton Heston. But then when it's soon revealed that it's James Brolin who is the guy that with the bomb and stuff, then that's when stuff really starts getting out of hand. And of course, Mariette Hartley plays a pregnant woman, and she's about a month away from having the kid. And of course, like these types of movies, they always had a bunch of stuff going on and to add to the main drama and stuff. And of course, the kid comes early, so they're dealing with that. They end up in Anchorage, but then turns out James Brolin wants to go to Moscow because he's trying to defect, and so it's a whole, then we get more into the Cold War commie conspiracy shit, and of course, the action sequences, the shots of the plane are fucking magnificent. Some of the best, plane cinematography, especially for the 70s, and even for the 90s, because even in the 90s, this shit kind of looked a little fake, but that is on fucking point. And then when they get to Moscow, he's expecting to get a fucking hero's welcome and stuff, and all the planes flying around, they get him to the airport, and then he just ends up getting blown to bits by fucking machine gun fire and stuff. It's honestly the film. It's a pretty decent build up, but the film itself kind of has a very anticlimactic climax. Very pretty lame and stuff, because it's they ends up shooting Charlton. It's a very subdued Charlton Heston too. You kind of expect, even by this point in the early 70s, you kind of expect Charlton Heston to be a little more intense and just take charge, and he holds his own. But it's I feel like halfway through this movie, he would have knocked the fuck out of James Brolin. Bomb or no bomb type thing. He would have found a way, or a bit better way. But they kind of just go along with it, and they end up in Moscow and shit, and then they end up killing. But there's that weird ending of they're getting him away on the stretcher. He's been shot, and he just looks up and sees a plane flying. He's just smiling. It's seems like a pretty lame way to end this movie. And then we move forward to Turbulence, directed by Robert Butler, starring Ray Liotta and Lauren Holly, and a few others like Hector Elizondo, Rachel Ticotin, and Brendan Gleeson, who plays a bank robber in this. It's very fucking sinister. The film itself takes place on Christmas Eve. Hector Elizondo is a cop who's been chasing the Lonely Heart Strangler, who he suspects to be Ray Liotta's character. And they capture him at the beginning of the film, and then they're supposed to be transporting him from New York to L.A. for all that whatever extradition type thing. And Hector Elizondo is not allowed to fly with him, so they get a bunch of the federal agents to transport him across the plane. And everything seems to be fine. There's a handful of passengers and nothing out of the ordinary. But then that Brendan Gleeson is also one of the prisoners. It's pretty much just Brendan Gleeson and Ray Liotta. And they're both, except like Ray Liotta was exceptional at playing a psycho. You know, it's like James Brolin's character in Skyjacked. You know, I feel like he's pretty fucking psychotic, and I feel like he does play it pretty good, but he ain't shit compared to Ray Liotta, because Ray Liotta, man, that was one of the best actors of all time. That motherfucker had an intensity to him that a lot of people just didn't have, and it especially shines through in this film because he's very charismatic, charming, but he can split off into that psycho shit in a second. And he does that several times. You know, once Brendan Gleeson kills one of the agents and kind of like it turns it into a hostage situation, that's when Ray Liotta kind of takes charge. He ends up killing him and all the other agents and stuff, and even the pilot. Both pilots are dead, so now nobody's flying the plane. We come to a similar situation that is found in like Airport 1975, where the stewardess is flying the plane, played by the badass Lauren Holly. Like, she kind of starts out in the film where it's like, you know, she's been scorned by her fiance, and, you know, she's kind of taken in by the charm of Ray Liotta. But as the film progresses, like, she takes charge. You know, she fucking is able to fly and land the plane with the help of another pilot played by Ben Cross. And, you know, the film itself is very fucking intense. The action, the build-up, like, this is a pretty solid flick for something that you wouldn't expect anything out of. I would say the 90s were exceptional at making action films. While the 70s were no slouch at it, the 90s, for some reason, were way better at making mindless entertainment. I don't know what that says about that decade, but there's a certain sincerity to this mindless entertainment, you know, and especially when you have a great actor like Ray Liotta to chew the scenery, and a perfect match for him. Like Lauren Holly, like, not to be trifled with, you know, she fucks that motherfucker up, you know, and it's this whole like nightmare in the sky basically. And, you know, she's like I said, everything where she even puts a bullet through Ray Liotta's head in the film. Like, it's fucking, like I said, this film is pretty solid, and it's like one of those Christmas movies that people probably don't even talk about. You know, I forgot it was Christmas when I put it on. But this round clearly has to go to Turbulence, because it's just a better action film. Plus, if anything, it's because of Ray Liotta. Like, if we're going off of, like, because both movies are pretty solid as far as like what's a good movie, but Turbulence just has more oomph to it, you know. Like, I'm on the edge of my seat the whole time. With Skyjacked, it's like this fucking like kind of fun type thing, you know, where it's like we see more. There's not much danger, you know, where like Walter Pidgeon and Roosevelt Greer can talk about music and all this shit, you know. But whereas like in Turbulence, you know, nobody's really safe in this film because these motherfuckers are psychotic. Like, James Brolin does play a pretty good psycho in this film, but he hams it up a little too much, to the point where it's like you can't really take it seriously. With like Ray Liotta, you take that shit seriously, you know. And it's very fucking like, and the amazing Rachel Tickerton is also in Turbulence. She's one of the people on the ground trying to deal with the situation in Turbulence. And so for anybody keeping score, that's 60-50. 70s are only up by 10 now. I mean, the 90s, like I said, they keep coming back. They had little gems like Turbulence, where it's like, you know, it's fun, it's intense, you know, it's just a real ass movie, you know. And like I said, Ray Liotta, what an actor, you know, a tremendous loss when he died, you know, because nobody could like chew the scenery quite like him, and just the shit that he does in this film. And like I said, Lauren Holly too, fucking exceptional as the flight attendant who ends up, you know, the stewardess is flying the plane type shit. And I don't think it's ever been done better, honestly. And a nice little Christmas flick, so 'tis the season for that. If I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. You know, all this shit's open for debate. This is just one asshole's opinion. You know, I'm looking at every single film from the 70s and the 90s, putting them together because I got to know. I got to know what decade is, you know, scientifically. For all the shit talkers and the naysayers, I got to fucking know. And personally, I got to know if I'm right, because my money's on the 70s. But the 90s keep coming back and surprising me, especially with something like Turbulence, man. Because like I said, dude, that kind of mindless entertainment was what the 90s were best at. Now, maybe the 70s were better for intellectual cinema, and we may maybe make an argument saying that one's better than the other. But honestly, if a movie is good, it don't matter if it's smart or dumb. Good is good no matter what. I'll fight anybody on that shit. Just because a movie's smart doesn't mean it's great. Just because a movie's dumb doesn't mean it's bad. So 50 to 6 or 60 to 50. 60 to 50. 70s are up by 10. This shit is getting crazier. You know, we're nearing the end of the year. This shit'll go. I'll probably be doing this shit till I'm an old man. You know, and you know, at least 2 or 3 people will watch it. Who knows? But stay tuned for the results.